Welcome everybody to the November 17th, 2021 Brookline School Committee Finance Subcommittee meeting. We are going to get some of the minutes and other documents out of the way, and hopefully Sam will join us in the next moment or two. But why don't we start with the minutes from, I have them here, from October 20th, if anyone wants to make a motion. Susan or David? There's only 3 of us tonight.
I'll move them.
Thank you. David, will you second? Oh, is David even there right now? Oh, you are.
Yes, I second.
Okay, thanks. Voting, David?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Next, we will go to the request for gifts. So there's $6,250 from the PTO for the essay workshop. If we can get a motion for approval.
I move that we approve.
Okay, Susan? Will you second it? Thanks.
Second.
Okay. Susan, how do you vote?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And I just want to say that I participated in that workshop this year, and it is wonderful. And for anyone who hasn't, it's like a really enjoyable morning spent with the students talking about their college essays. So very, very great. Next thing on the agenda is the acceptance of grants. And I will move favorable action. Susan or David, we want to do second?
I'll second.
Thanks. Susan, actually, before that, I have one question. Donna, do you know the dollars that are on the grants? There's another 490 plus 43 for 1,000 that's in, this is in addition to our SR3 funds, right? This is ARP in addition.
Are you talking about the first one?
The first one and the one underneath it, that those are about, as I confirm it, right? Like that's what I'm just making sure I'm interpreting the cover sheet correctly.
Yes, and if,
Okay.
Page 2 as well breaks it down. They're the state and federal entitlement and allocation grants by district.
Yeah.
And that lists them all out as well.
But those are one-time funds though, right? Because it's ARP money.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Okay. We've moved and seconded. David, how do you vote?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay. So now we are on to fiscal year 22. Oh, no, wait, I missed something. Sorry. A&F office personnel update. So I don't think, unless Sam is in the attendees, which she's not yet. So why don't we, Linus, do you want to introduce Kiana? I don't know if you two know each other yet, or Donna.
Yeah, I can start it off and then pass to Donna for the formal from the A&F office. We're happy to welcome Ms. Kiana Price to the Brookline Public Schools of Brookline in the program director position. She'll be able to share where she joins us from, but Kiana and our paths crossed briefly when I was working in in Boston Public Schools. She worked at one of the schools that I supported, so I got a little chance to see her in action at the school level, and so we're happy to bring her on board. So with that, I'll pass it over to Donna.
Yes, we welcome Kiana on this past Monday. She'll be replacing Susanna McCormick DeBoer, working in the Office of Administration and Finance on the 5th floor. And we're very happy to have her as part of our team.
That's great. And I see Sam joined us too, but Kiana, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself really quickly?
Yes, sure. Hello. My name is Kiana Price. I'm new to Brookline Public Schools, but very excited and ready to get to the business. I'm the new program manager for admin and finance, and I actually came from Boston Public Schools, working in a school setting, but definitely refreshed to be in this department.
That's great. Well, welcome. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks. Sam, are you here yet or not really here yet? I'm not sure if he's really here yet. That's fine. Kiana, if you want to stay, you're welcome to stay, but you're also definitely like, don't feel obligated to stay out. We just wanted, since we knew you joined, we wanted to make sure we had the chance to say hi and welcome.
Thanks for giving me the chance to say hi. Because I'm still driving, I'm going to log off so I can be a little bit more safe.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you.
The next thing on the agenda is FY22 budget update. Sam, are you here now? If not, I will take that one. Okay. Oh, my phone's ringing. It's Sam. Hang on one second. Robin, do you mind emailing Sam the phone number to call in? He's in dealing with stuff and needs the phone number.
Sure, I can do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll keep going. Fiscal year 22 update. I sent along, it was attached to the materials, a memo that we received at Town School Partnership last week. And the memo includes some of the adjustments that are being made to the budget for the current year. And I want to draw your attention to the bottom of page 2. Do you all have that in front of you? Would it be helpful if I pulled it up on the screen or, okay, let me go find it. Let me get it to, 1 second. Oh, Robin, can you enable screen sharing? Okay. So can you see the document now? I'm going to make it bigger, but so if at the bottom of page 2 is an important change, which is the town finance office has increased by $2 million the expected revenue for the current budget year.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead and take it from here, Sam, or do you want me to talk through it?
I can speak to it, but I appreciate your help. Thank you. I apologize for the technical difficulties, but yes, I mean, the big thing here for F22 is the town has determined, and again, this is new at a very global level. Mel Kleckner and Melissa Goff made Linus and I aware that there's a need, I guess, with respect to their collective bargaining position for this year, the town, that they weren't going to set, they had no money in reserve for, or in the budget for any kind of settlement. And so as part of reviewing the budget and where revenues were tracking versus what was, I think in their mind, an extremely conservative projection or budget build in the areas that they've identified, that being the local option taxes, meals and room, hotel rooms, parking and fines, and other fees, permits, building permits. They felt comfortable putting another $2 million rather, to the budget. And I guess again, as an observer, even with the adjusted numbers, $2 million higher, it's still substantially lower than what has happened even in F21 actual. And so I think there's a high level of confidence that these numbers will be realized, and therefore, and also given new revenues with a 60-40 allocation based on the town school partnership, for what our discussion is there's another $1,196,071, which is on the table when town meeting actually convenes and people can vote. Hopefully that's tonight. And for the town side of 791,587, Mel Kleckner's made it clear that money is to go into collective bargaining settlements. For us on the school side, and I don't know, Mariah can help on whether this is something, I guess until we actually get the money, there's nothing to vote. And we get voted a top line anyway, as the school department. But that being said, the two possibilities of where these funds might be utilized, and again, there's no determination whether it's one, both, and in what proportion. It's either going to go to augment our potential for settling open bargaining agreements, or to put us back from our structural deficit for 23 by allowing some expenses that right now are allocated to our ESSER grants to go back onto the operating budget. And I think that captures it.
Any questions from anybody on that? Okay. I have one question, and this is ignorance on this. And you sort of, I think, just alluded to this, Sam. Does the school committee need to vote to accept that money? Or do we need to vote to do anything once town meeting gives it to us?
I've never been in a situation, but I mean, I guess I would go back to last year. It's funny because Donna and I were in a meeting with OpenGov today, and looking at, and the good news there is everything's tying out, which which is better than it was. But in looking at F21, what was determined is the town gave $1,750,000 as a supplement. And I guess I would ask you back, Mariah, what happened when that happened? Did the committee do anything special?
I don't remember. Does anyone? Susan, you were finance chair when that happened?
Sorry, when what happened?
Well, when the budget gets adjusted, if the revenue allocation or the budget allocation to schools gets adjusted, does school committee need to vote anything? Did we vote something last year to accept the extra 1.75 million? Or does it just come in and then the staff reallocates expenses against it?
We can check the finance minutes. I don't remember voting an acceptance of it, although we probably should have.
Yeah, I
But-
don't think we need to vote to accept. Maybe, but we do need to vote to where it goes to, because it's
Right.
part of our budgeting process.
For sure.
Okay.
That's the way I would
I
say
think-
it.
So just, I wouldn't think you need to vote because the school department is a department, just like, the building department. And the budget gets approved and each department gets the funds the town meeting, votes to give to them. What you do with the money once you have it, of course, is a different issue in terms of the school committee voting. But, the revenue comes to you just like any other department.
But isn't that, so
We
that's sort of
vote-
what Helen was just saying about we need to sort of vote where it gets allocated now.
Well,
Yeah,
but also
that's the same stuff.
we vote incoming revenue. We vote to accept incoming revenue. Like if it's a grant, if it's
Grant.
whatever it is.
But that's different. Well, to me, that's different than you being a department of the town of Brookline. If you're taking, you have to vote to accept money coming from outside the town. I can understand that. But
This was,
the budget gets approved in the spring. You don't vote to accept what town meeting votes in the spring, do you?
Well, we do vote, yeah, we vote a dollar amount to request, right?
But we
But that's
vote a
prior
request.
to-
Yeah.
We vote, well, actually, what we do is we vote a budget allocation as well, based on a request. And so I think if the dollar amount changed, I mean, Cliff's technically right. Once town meeting votes, we don't then vote again to accept that money, because we've already voted a budget that assumes that money. Presumably,
Got it.
if town meeting gave us a different amount from what we had voted in our February vote or whatever, our top line number, presumably, to Helen's point, we would have to vote as to what to do with it, because we're supposed to vote it into categories.
Can I
Basically.
propose?
Yeah,
And
I'm
just,
gonna go
and just
ahead.
to be clear, sorry, Sam, this is a budget amendment that town meeting has to vote before the money actually gets delivered to anybody.
Right.
this is
I
money
guess-
this year now, right?
Yes, this year. Go ahead, Sam.
Sorry.
I think the way to solve this, and I don't disagree with any of this discussion. I think the way to solve this is I provide quarterly budget reports that are then voted and accepted by the school committee. When I do the December report, I guarantee you this 1.196 million will be reflected. And at that point, you can vote to accept it. And by voting to accept that report, you're accepting how those monies are allocated.
Well, I don't think we did vote to accept previous reports, but we could vote to accept reports, I guess. Maybe that's, I'm just gonna, I guess we'll put a pin in this and say at the December meeting, whether, like, let's just ask for a plan of how you're gonna reallocate the money. Does that make sense? Sam?
Yeah, I'm thinking. I mean,
Oh, okay.
the answer is yes. The only thing is, I can go as far as to say, any monies that we have to allocate, assuming we have a settlement of all our collective bargaining agreements by that time, that's over the budget, that's where the money would get drawn first. And anything left over would go to offset ESSER. It's just, I don't want to predetermine the outcome. I'd be surprised if we have settlements, because again, all of our contracts except for Unit C aren't settled for F22.
Well, why
And
don't,
so-
rather than speculating on it now, let's just park it for now and you can come back with something for next month, whether it's definitive or not.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so the next item on the agenda, now that we've discussed the 1.2 million, Harlan, do you want to say something? Do I hear you almost saying something?
I was just mumbling.
Oh.
Sorry.
Do you want to
But
mumble out
I
loud?
was just remembering Susan's wise words last year about we should try to keep whatever we can of the ESSER for the following year. And I'm hoping
Correct.
that whatever new monies come in, that would be our first goal of how to manage our budget for next fiscal year. And to keep that, because that can be helpful, over.
That is always and will continue to be the plan.
Great.
Can I ask, actually, this is related to this question, and I was going to ask it when we were in the grants discussion of things. I sort of half-assed it. Sam, there was $530-ish thousand in grants that were ARP for IDEA. Was that already known grant money that you have accounted for, or is that extra money that will allow us to offset in addition to what we already knew about?
I guess my answer would be both, but I'll tell you, was it known? Yes, this was known not at the same time as ESSER 3, but shortly thereafter. The reason I haven't counted it as additional surplus, so to speak, is I needed to find out from, at that time when I did the first quarter, Casey, no Miller, hadn't decided how much of that is supplement and how much of that is supplant, because under these ARPA funds, I think you can supplant. And that's still a work in progress. I think literally, and Donna can help me, literally within the past week or so, we just approved budgets for, or submitted budgets. Yeah, she's nodding good. And for how this money is going to be allocated. And so by the second quarter report, I can be more definitive on how much favorable offset that's going to be from, to free up money from effectively ESSER 3. Because again, to Helen's point, and just an update for this whole committee, because this has become more clear, is ESSER 1, 2, and 3, ESSER 1's deadline's been extended further still. It was first, December of 21, and then it's now extended to 9/30 of 22. So ESSER 1, you have till 9/30 of 22. ESSER 2, you have till 9/30 of 23. And ESSER 3, you have till 9/30 of 24. And so clearly, we've pretty much spent ESSER 1. We're going to spend ESSER 2 this year, and the goal is, to leave as much on the table for ESSER 3, because that can carry all the way into the beginning of F25. And so that's where the push, so to speak, will be. So all things being equal, if we determine a $250,000 of the 530 is the plan, then that's another $250,000 that carries an ESSER 3.
And are those ARP funds, those are one time also, right? So we're essentially using those up. They're not going to repeat, or that's not this year's increment of it. Is that, I guess my question is that the total allocation of ARP for IDEA, or are there?
As far as
Okay.
Yeah. As far as I understand, I know of no more money coming.
Okay. So we have already gotten a little bit into the next agenda item, which is the ESSER update. And I think, Sam, you said more or less what you wanted to say about it, which is that as all these funds are reallocating, we're pushing ESSER, where it's freeing up the ability for ESSER 3 to roll into future years.
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead.
The only other update, because it's good news potentially, is, and that's why, I think people like Linus and myself are good about reading the commissioner weekly updates, because there's nuggets in there. And potentially a $200,000 nugget was there's additional money related to the pandemic that could be dished out for effectively our USP and SEL related to COVID, that we have a deadline of Friday, but I'm working with Mike D'Onofrio and Kelly Durgan and Casey and Leslie to put in an application for the maximum, because when you get an email from the commissioner saying there's money left over, come and get it, you don't have to ask twice. And so there's no guarantee, but we should know hopefully sooner than later. And again, it would be the same thing. If we got that money, it would free money up off of ESSER 3. Great.
And actually, it frees money off of ESSER 2, which would then let us roll something else onto ESSER 2, which would free F. Yeah. Okay.
That's correct.
Helen?
What is UST?
USP, Universal Summer
USP.
Program.
Oh, thank
Summer
you.
program.
Thank you. I heard T.
The other sort of just review quick update on ESSER is I just wanted us to go quickly over to acknowledge the ESSER 3 hearing that we had on the 21st of October, and just articulate that we heard 5 different public comments at that meeting. One was about the return of inclusion facilitators. One was about enhancing the outdoor classroom and garden learning program. One was about returning the Understanding Our Differences and Similarities program. One was about increasing funding for child study team and educational team facilitators. And the last one was about improving HVAC at BHS, which at least that last one I know is on our, or at least HVAC is already on our CIP request. So I was glad that we got some public comments for the mandated public hearing, and it's fodder to, as well as many different competing priorities, but it was helpful to have those people come to speak to us. Okay, last item on the agenda is review a possible vote on the budget calendar and the budget guidelines and priorities. I'm going to pull up the budget calendar on the screen so we can talk about that. Hopefully. Can you see that? Yeah. Okay. So this budget calendar is a little bit different from previous years in that rather than having all the responsibilities running into one long document, we broke them up into what finance is talking about, what was going to school committee and when, and then the other sort of more the town side activities, but it's not just the town side activities. So as you see, we've got the drafts of things. This is us right now. We're talking about the calendar and the guidelines. Those will go to full school committee next week. The important dates that we haven't necessarily talked about, but I think people will be interested in talking about, and I'll see if, of course, I can't get it to show up on, let me see if I can get it to show. That should do it. So I want to highlight some of the dates that we talked about specifically in previous meetings and some of these other things. So the December 7th is when the town administrator is presenting the long range financial forecast and the preliminary CIP. December 15th, we have on our calendar to discuss the superintendent's, like a preliminary draft of the superintendent's budget vote memo, which would include the sort of high level budget presentation by categories and including sort of a highlight on notable adjustments to the different investments that are there. So that's for us for the 15th of December. Then the other thing I'm highlighting over here is that on January 14th, so basically a month after that, there'll be a flurry of activity between those things. January 14th is the staff plan to have the OpenGov for next year going live, and then the budget book also available. And I put quotes in book because I think there'll be some paper copies, but also it'll be a PDF. So, you know, whether it's e or real, but there will be a book this year. And the idea is that they would both be available on that same day. The 19th, we would get an update on the budget at that point, and also get the quarter 2 report. And then the 20th is the actual presentation of the budget request. We would receive the budget vote memo. And then if you all recall, Stephen had asked that there be some earlier opportunity for public comment. He reflected that when we have the public hearing on the 3rd and then the vote the next week, it feels like maybe there's not a lot of time for people to deliberate. So we're offering an earlier sort of pre-hearing. It's a public comment. It's not the official hearing, but the opportunity to comment on January 20th. And then February 3rd is the official public hearing. February 10th is our official vote schedule. And then February 16th, I thought, would be where we could start to plan for some of the budget presentations that need to go forward. And I think that's more or less where, as far as it's fully fleshed out, is through February, and everything else is TBD at this point. But the important dates are really, this January 14th, 19th, 20th, February 3rd, February 10th, January 15th date. Any comments, questions?
Mariah, just a quick question. When we say categories, what do we have in mind?
Well, I think we're talking about the sort of 5 categories of personnel, et cetera, as opposed to other categories that you might be thinking of, but not necessarily. Do you have a request for the categories that you see?
Well, I guess all I would say is that we have struggled to make any meaning whatsoever of those categories, in terms of, or at least I have. Like, what does that mean in terms of which program is growing, which one is shrinking? How are we changing allocations? And so I think we should, if we're going to use those categories, which I'm hoping we'll be able to revise, make more meaningful, then I think we're going to have to figure out a different way to have that conversation, I guess. Because those categories don't tell us anything, really, at all.
Linus and Sam, do you have any comment on December 15th and what categories might show up at that point?
I mean, my only comment, and this isn't the first time I've heard this kind of input from Susan. Not to be critical, it's just I've heard this before about the budget update, and I think that's a goal. I mean, it depends how granular we can make it. And, again, tying back to, in a way, we have some of this because we've had to go granular to tie out to the current year budget. We're pushing out to we call them budget managers. Donna did it with the non-personnel. Renan is doing it with the personnel, which we tied out, which was great. But it's a lot of lines and a lot of detail. So does it exist? The answer is yes. Can it be unwieldy? The answer is yes. And so I think what I would recommend, and I can share it ahead of time, maybe when does the subcommittee meet again? Around that time, unfortunately. I can give like a draft maybe for a sub of the subcommittee to take a look at. Maybe, by department, and I think that's what Susan wanted, not like all 1,500 employees all listed, but maybe, math. And math has X number of FTEs and X number of total dollar budget. And that's what's this year, and then here's what's in for next year. And I think that's possible, but let me get back to you.
Helen?
I'm not sure that's where Susan was going, but I don't want to put words in her mouth. I guess what I'm thinking in December, we should, first of all, you may want to amend this to discuss preliminary budget memo, not budget vote memo, because it sounds like we're going to vote something. And we're not voting anything in December, correct?
Right.
Well, isn't the memo called the budget vote memo?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Preliminary budget memo.
February, that is true. That's the only vote you're going to take.
Right. So just to make it clearer for people so they don't think we're voting a budget in December, we don't even know for sure. I mean, we will have just maybe gotten from the town what they're allocating to us, and that will change, as we all know, over time quite a bit. I mean, we'll know much more in January after the governor's budget, because that's usually the bottom line for where things are going. And hopefully it goes up in the House and the Senate. I think the important piece here is the highlight on adjusted investments. So meaning things that we are either thinking of not doing or doing more of might be, and assuming that everything else will stay constant at this point. Is, Susan, is that sort of what you're looking for?
So I think there are a few different things.
In
One
December,
is,
I'm talking about.
no, yeah, I think there are a few different things. I think the thing I'm most concerned about is that we have some way to, it's at a broad level, that we have some way to understand the budget and vote categories that are meaningful. Right now, the categories are not meaningful from a managerial point, strategic point of view. It doesn't tell us anything. If it was $1 million one way or another way, like it just, so what I was hoping is that we would have categories, we'd be able to vote budget categories that focus, that were a little bit more programmatic or strategic. I'm not suggesting we do anything other than data we already have. So I'm not suggesting new analysis or some new architecture. What I think I'm suggesting is sort of where Sam is going with this, which is like, why don't we actually take a look at what we have, and why don't we try to come up with meaningful categories such that if things were going to move from one to another category, that would like mean something, I guess. And that the narrative that goes with it does, Helen, what you're talking about, which is to say, where are the big changes? Where are the big adjustments up and down? What are the big investment areas? What are new one-time investment areas like math or whatever, or, you know, adjustment counselors or whatever we're calling them? Where are areas that we're ramping down or we're revising, like ECS, like some narrative that gives us a sense of what's happening in the budget. And then the categories are absolutely not the level of 1,500, but they're not the level of these 5 either, that there's something, they're more meaningful. And so I'm happy to look at, Sam, you probably have more experience in other districts than we have. So, you know, I'm happy to think about what those different categories could or should look like. How's that?
I mean, I have some ideas, which, again, what I'm struggling with, I mean, and I agree, I appreciate the comment. You know, we do have some information, so we, you know, rather than create new structures, which I think we truly don't have the time right now to do. I mean, even at department total level, budget manager level, you know, when I looked at the, you know, again, I just had Renan put it together. It tied out was, you know, it's $104 million of 120 is staff. And I think all, you know, there were probably 3 dozen lines, okay, 3 dozen separate cost centers. And, you know, that can be overwhelming, but maybe that's where we cut it for now. Right. And we add we add the stuff to it, which is the other 16 million. And that's what we talk about. This is where it is. This is where it's going. But is that too many lines?
Well, so I would say for this committee, no, it's not too many lines. It's probably not enough lines. But for a vote, it should be fewer lines, because anytime money moves from one category to another, that's a re-vote of the committee, and we don't want that to happen on a regular basis. So I would say the vote category should be different from the level of discussion at a multiple hour finance committee workshop where we actually are going into detail.
Okay.
Well, I think, could we talk about this, Sam, in terms of sort of what you're saying, you know, maybe the big buckets are, and I'm making this up, so don't read too much into this, but, you know, core classroom instruction, and within that is math and, you know, ELA and this and that, and we go all the way through the different categories. And then we would be able to see, oh, well, we're spending, you know, maybe we're spending 5.6% of our budget on math instruction this year, and next year it's 4.6 or 6.6 or it's 5. You know, we would be able to see these trends in sort of terms of like proportional share of investment of the budget. And then that would give us a sense of where is the sort of, you know, and if the change in share is growing, you know, what's different about that? And it lets us explore those things That would also let us discuss things like, you know, as we talk about math, time spent on math and ELA, and what does it mean, you know, if a budget is growing, and does, you know, is that reflecting additional time or not? And, you know, it allows us to have some of these other conversations. And I don't think that would be too hard, because we have staff, we know FTEs by that, and we know materials and supplies by that. So it should be, and services is mostly, not exclude, but I mean, it should be easy to, I would think, not easy, I don't want to oversell it, but it shouldn't be too hard to break it down in sort of larger chunks like that.
Is there any reason why we need to restrict ourselves to only 5 categories? Is that just by custom? Is that something that's common across other districts? It seems to me, to Susan's point, that we would be increasing transparency both for the general public and for ourselves if we had even 20 categories. I'm not sure there's anything wrong with that.
There's no limit per statute. Again, statute, by statute, you get awarded a top line number and you can do with it as you will. The reason you have 5 lines is the accounting system that I'm used to and you have called Munis has these blockings of object codes. 51 series is personnel, 52 is this, 53 is that, or 55 is this, 5A is that. And so that's why it's that way. But certainly you can slice and dice the 120 million in that you want. What I would recommend, let me take a pass at it and put it what I think is into meaningful categories. But what I will say, just to give a talking point, is I vision 2 things that come to the same. And what I mean by that is round numbers, we got 120 million. I like round numbers. Let's say what I ask is, we ask for 130. I know we're probably not going to ask for, but let's say we ask for 130. Okay. So you're going to see 120 chopped up in categories, and then you're going to see 130, and where the 10 million is going. But then, department by department, area by area, function by function. But then you're going to have an executive summary 1-pager that says, and now this is what I'm used to in my past district, is you start at 20 million, and then what are the big chunks that get you to the 130? Annual wage adjustment, $3 million. Additional, money coming from grant transfers, $3 million. This program, $1 million. And then you see those big pieces, and that explains programmatically where the 10. What are the budget drivers of the 10 million? Does that make any sense? But that I'm used to.
I think the 1-pager is a great idea in terms of the differences, but I think the budget book the December number, I think, at least in Brooklyn, I don't know what your experience is in other places, but I have yet to see the December number be the same as what we vote in February. Susan, correct me if I'm wrong.
But can I just say though that the December, I think my intent in us talking about this in December was so that the structure of what comes to us in January and February is what we would like to see. It's not that the final numbers are going to be there. It's that we're having the opportunity to reflect on how we want this presentation to look so that it's meaningful to us.
Well,
does that make sense? Like the numbers will change, but if we're talking about, for example, rather than just having 1 column, 5 rows, which is what we've traditionally had, we have 20 columns or whatever the right number of meaningful category is, still the 5 rows, but we have it's broken down into these other side things, then that's helpful, I think.
So this was the budget book in FY16. Where it really, have you seen these old budget books, Mariah?
Books.
I was on advisory. I've seen them.
So you've seen them.
Yeah.
To me, this with the summary in the beginning, and the detail behind it, if people wanted it, explain, I was able to understand our budget.
I wasn't.
Oh, okay. All right.
I mean, by year 3, I was probably able to, but it's not
Oh.
exactly user friendly. It was not user friendly. It was way too big.
Okay, I don't mind making it smaller, but this sort of thing where you have the superintendent's message, you have, what the amounts are, and any detail that you want to go and look for,
I think we can do better than those earlier ones,
that's
but
fine.
but I
That's
agree
fine.
with Susan that we would like to be able to understand without having to go into that book. That book represents the weeds. And it would be really nice to not have to toggle through a 400-page book to get the gist of things. So to whatever extent we can get something that allows us to have that 40,000 foot view, or maybe it's not even 40,000 foot, it's a 10,000 foot view, but it's not in the weeds. I think that would be very valuable. It allows us to be better advocates.
Yeah.
So, any other comments on this timeline before we go to the guidelines?
The only thing I would say is that just to whatever extent we can have a narrative, it doesn't have to be Shakespeare, but some narrative about what's happening. What are we increasing? What are we decreasing in a meaningful way? It's not just the categories, it's what are we trying to accomplish, tied to numbers, as opposed to like PowerPoint that's like so high level, it's hard to understand. And detail that's so detailed, it's hard to tie, like it's something that ties it together. Does that make sense? Okay.
It makes sense to me. But that's what December is going to be for too. I think we need to continue to triangulate towards this. And Sam, I think you heard a willingness of subcommittee members to beta test, or to provide offline feedback about categories to you as needed.
Necessary, no question about it.
The last item on let me ask one more question about this. Do people feel like will you feel comfortable voting this calendar, or is the calendar something we would prefer not to vote because it's sort of more dynamic and we'd rather just vote guidelines? What do you think about that?
We vote the calendar every year and we never stick to it. And so I think we just sort of have to recognize what is the point of the calendar. If the point of the calendar is to be kind of directionally correct, great. If there are some things that we actually care about, we should call them out and then and really stick to them. But in 13 years, we have never once stuck to the calendar among 7 superintendents. So I just want us to enter this with a little humility.
That's
Helen's
exactly
like gonna fall off her floor laughing, but I'll fall off her chair laughing because this is Helen's speech and I finally come around to it. So all I would say is if there are 2, 3, 4 dates that we really need to hit, let's put those on there and vote them. And the rest should be directionally, here's the stuff that's going to happen in between. But I don't think no matter how many times we talk about the budget calendar, we still end up with the same one and it never works. So maybe we can fix it.
I have 4 dates on there that I would like us to, if we are voting on things, and I'll pull it back up again just so I can talk about them. But I absolutely agree with this. The 4 dates that I think are the ones that we should be committed to, but it also requires staff to be committed to them too, which I think they are, but I just want to, if we vote them, it makes it that much more potent, is this January 14th of the budget book being available, January 20th having public comment, and then the 3rd hearing, and then the 10th vote. And to me, those are the 4 that are the sort of critical ones that we would vote. Last year, and I think previous years, like the date of when material was available slid and slid and slid and slid and slid and slid and slid. And I don't want to have that happen again. I really think that this January 14th date is critical. That's just my thinking. I agree with your point, Susan. Like the rest of this is, best wishes, but those dates are kind of like really important.
I would just create a document that says, here are the 4 dates we care about at the top, and that's what we're voting. And then the rest is like commentary and an explanation of what's going to happen, we hope.
Does anyone on the subcommittee have a problem with that approach?
No, I think that makes sense. And the other dates can be more aspirational.
Yeah. So Helen, I saw your hand is up. You're on mute.
Just a question, does Melissa think she'll have numbers that are good enough for us to be working from for that January 14th?
She always gives a set of numbers in the last meeting in December. She always does a presentation with the numbers at the last meeting in December to the select board, and it changes dramatically, but we just go with that number. I mean, whether it's good enough or, I mean, it's never quite, I'm not sure what you mean by good enough, but that's what she presents.
Okay.
So if I could reflect on this a slightly different way, we're talking about having January 14th, our numbers live. And I believe the town side is almost on that same time period. And so like maybe a couple days later to have numbers. And so they're going to be working on the same time frame we are. Like we're not getting out drastically ahead of the town side in terms of Melissa's numbers. It will be what they are at that point, and everyone can iterate.
I guess my question would be, because usually after the governor's budget is when it changes. And I just don't want people to do double work. You do a budget and then you find out, oh, you have a little bit more, and now where you don't have to cut X or Y or pare down on this or look where we're, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but there's only like a 2-week difference between when we have to have a hearing anyway. We have to have a hearing and we have to give the public something to react to. So,
okay.
Yeah, you just sort of, okay. So I like that suggestion is we're going to vote the rest of it is sort of a like theoretical guidepost, but those 4 dates we can pull up at the top and that'll be the vote.
It's like a town meeting. You have like the resolution, then you have the explanation. This is like
Yeah, that's right. We'll have a whole bunch of whereases and then the resolved will be those dates. Okay. That's
no,
helpful.
I mean like you guys have like pages of like discussion of what the warrant article means, but that's not what you vote. They're not
You're talking about the
whereas.
explanation. Yeah.
It's after, not the whereases. Yeah.
Okay, so now last item on the agenda is the guidelines that were modified, and everyone received those yesterday. I'm going to pull those up as well so people have them handy in front of us. I'm going to try and pull them up. So this is the document that was sent to us yesterday. The top is almost the same as the previous version. When I compared it, this language right here, as well as strategically position us to develop our strategic plan, is new. Other than that, I believe the first 2 paragraphs are identical. This part is identical, and then the guidelines part here has changed. There was a longer list in our previous version, and now it's a somewhat shorter list with some examples below. Linus, are you there, and do you want to sort of make some comments about it before the committee provides feedback?
I think what we attempted to do, thank you, Mariah.
Oh, Linus, I think we lost you.
All right, am I here now?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thank you all so much again for the feedback you provided. We hope that we have captured some of that feedback to talk about what are we looking at for potential investments for next year. But I also want thinking about setting us up to receive or build a strategic plan, but what can we meaningfully accomplish and work on next year is the thinking here. And I think we have some broad brushstrokes here that will start that alignment process for. So with that, I am anxious to hear your feedback or your thoughts on what's before you now.
Susan, David, Helen.
Yeah, I have a question. What does improve the life cycle of a PSB employee? What does that mean?
My guess would be that this is referring to providing professional development opportunities, making sure that our PSB employees, especially those of color, feel valued, that they stay within the system. It's probably trying to encompass several subcategories in one.
Linus, is that Sam?
Yep.
Was that the intent there?
Yeah.
I would agree, yeah.
David, do you have other comments?
Just on the top one, ensure equitable access to curriculum for all students. I'd like equitable access to curriculum and services. It's not just curriculum. That's obviously very important. But I think that would fit in with the general theme of post-pandemic relief. And then just also for our special education students, those on 504 plans.
Nope, that makes sense.
For that one comment I have on it is that I would love to see some sort of mention of particular focus on subpopulations that have, I'm not going to get the words particularly perfect, but like that are dramatically or have drastic
Disproportionality.
Disproportionality. Thank you. Documented disproportionality. I mean, I guess I feel like it would be wonderful to have a commitment to making sure that that although we have, of course, students who are accessing different things at all range, that where we see that there is severe disproportionality, that we are like outlining that is a specific area, a specific priority area.
If we can add that, and I think yeah, because again, the way I'm seeing next year, or this particular budget cycle, is it's setting us up for the broader work where we are going to do some deeper strategic or more long-term investments. So what are what I'm considering are the preconditions and setting us up for that body of work, and being extremely intentional about that work. That's the way I'm thinking through it.
Yeah, I feel like understanding that there's the sort of short-term and long-term tension, as you say, you're setting things up for the longer term, but also not ignoring the fire that we already know is burning.
Absolutely.
Right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. The other comment I have here, and I think it's all sort of in here, it's just that this feels to me like it's it's zoomed out a little bit. And by a little bit, I probably mean like a lot. Like there's less details in here. One of the things that, and maybe it's below and I'm missing it a little bit. For example, it was in there before and maybe you just thought it was a little too dry, but I think it's important as we think about budget, the issues of inflation and supply chain, or I'll just say inflation, and how we ensure, but maybe you're counting that as being within the budget reserve. But it doesn't include, like, is that what you're thinking of, a budget reserve? Because the reserve to me says the things that we're not spending.
Is that on the second page, Mariah?
I don't see it here, but I might have missed it. About I see about obligations, the circuit breaker funding, enrollment patterns. I don't see anything about inflation costs. Because I mean, just thinking if we're putting $1 million for supplies this year, we know that $1 million is not buying that same set of supplies next year.
We can take that. We can take that note.
Okay.
It's certainly on the mind, and certainly Sam reminds us of that at each conversation. But if it's something that the committee or the body wants to call out, we can definitely put that back.
I feel like so many years when we say, oh, we're going to level fund this, it's like, well, at least we're going to be able to do what we did last year. And this year, probably more than in probably the first year in, as far as I can tell, this is the highest inflation in something like 20 or 25 years, possibly 30 from what I'm reading. That's right. It's not going to be true. So we have to, in my opinion, it has to be front and center. It doesn't necessarily have to be here, but it might have to be down here, but making sure that that's explicit, that gap. Okay. And then the one thing, and I'm just going to dwell on this again, and maybe you see it as being here, but I would love to know where it is the Universal Summer Program continuance. Is that somewhere here or down below?
go to the second page for me? Because I know we had it in there. I thought we had it in there from the first one.
I see other stuff, but I don't see that.
Okay. We'll take that note as well. And I was also thinking about that in terms of, and this is probably not on the agenda, was when we were thinking about the ARPA funding, what might be some longer term strategic investments we could make there. So I've been talking about sort of some initial ideas that we're kicking around as a senior team to have the committee consider there as well.
I'm glad you brought that up, Linus. Sorry to interject, but remind me, you know, and I don't disagree with what you just said, but in that, don't we have a window, and I don't know who's the one that hits that window with the town, because we have to apply like everybody else for that $43 million. And you know, that window's coming relatively soon, isn't it? You know,
I
after these
don't
listening-
think we got a clear sense of the timeline at Town School Partnership. I can't tell if Suzanne is still here. Suzanne, are you still here?
Yeah, I am. I'm sorry, but I was just phased out for a minute. What's the question? I'm sorry.
If we have the clear sense of the timeline for when we will know on the ARP, like who's been allocated what in the ARP money from the town.
I did not hear that. No.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think complicates it too, Sam, is that 11 of the 43 million,
County.
right, the county money is being managed by the county process, which would be
Right.
on its own timetable.
But my bigger concern, again, I'm famous for a lot of catchphrases. One is, if you don't ask, you don't get. If you do ask, you might get. And my understanding is we have to ask. And so the question is, how do we ask, and what's the timeline for us asking?
You mean for sort of operational budget as opposed to the CIP things that we put in?
Operating anything.
Yeah. I don't think we got clarity on that at Town School Partnership.
It's not clear to me who among us on the school side is kind of leading the charge to make applications for the ARP money. We might want to talk about that. Because they're going to have a supply apparently like everybody else. And
well, we did apply for our capital programs that we had put in a collective CIP application, but it also included our ARP requests. So that part of it was done.
Well, I would make sure that it follows the guidelines for applications for the ARP.
That's my fear. So I can reach out to Melissa. I mean, I'm happy. I mean, Linus, we're all busy, but Linus, I have a scheduled discussion with Melissa on the 26th about long-range planning. And so maybe I bring that up, if not before, to ask about the process for accessing the ARPA funds on the town side. That's all right with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Helen, I saw your hand. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Suzanne.
I was just going to say, Sam, that'd be great if you could then share that with us. I mean, my concern is that, I don't know how loud we have to be, and I don't know how much of a, a case we have to make that we deserve some of that funding and how we're going to use it. I don't believe we really presented at the community hearings that the who did that, the foundation, Brookline Community Foundation.
Well, that was meant to be hearing sessions for them to get content, right?
Right, but they're going to do some kind of little report about that. And it's not clear that the school side presented anything. And so,
but this wasn't feedback on the public on the town projects or the school projects. It was just community input into what the community wanted.
I know.
Okay.
I know,
That's where the confusion is, I think, Mariah. It's not clear I mean, they've sent the process over to the community fund.
Not
but
the entire process, just the public community input. That's
Okay.
that's the only
All right.
part of it that they're managing.
All right.
Yeah.
I know those who are on a particular bent around housing and how important that is, made sure they got their people out to talk about it because they were concerned that this little report, this summary report that the community foundation is going to release needs to have input that says, it came to our attention that, you know, people are concerned about housing. And will there be anything in there that says, this is what the school says that they would like? In other words, if we're not there at all, we're not at the table.
But that's not true.
Okay.
There's different channels from which things are coming in. I think that's nice. There's different sort of channels by which people, and the community foundation is only managing the public's input into the projects they'd like to see. They're not managing anything else beyond that. So that's just one source of content for the select board. But I agree with you. I think it would be helpful to understand at what time we are supposed to make these operational budget requests for ARP funding.
And also, I think there's some program requests, perhaps.
Well, isn't that operational? I'm thinking of that as operational as opposed to capital.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Sam, did you have something to say?
Yeah, just big picture. This is where I might need some direction. Is in my mind, we have basically 3 buckets with which there's additional revenue to be had. And I'll speak to operating first, which is there's ARP for revenue replacement. And that number's sitting right now at $6.1 million. And, you know, when, you know, finding out, is the town going to access some of it, all of it, and then how are they going to distribute it? Then that's priority 1 in my mind. Priority 1A is the town going to ask for a general override for F23? My belief is probably not, but we need certainty one way or the other sooner than later. And then 2, for capital, whatever's left is generally going to be allocated for capital and or other community-based kind of programming. And what is the timeline for us to hit the cycle? You know, and so, you know, where do I focus? And so where's the focus and who has the conversation when? You know, and with who?
I think it would be beneficial if you or Linus took that action item to discuss with your counterparts and, you know, get back to us on the timing, as you said, the timing for that, and then the if there is any override discussion. The revenue replacement did come up at Town School Partnership, right? And we talked about that. And the override conversation didn't come up at Town School Partnership, in part because Melissa said I asked about any sense of FY23 budget or revenue projections, and she said she didn't have anything until the December 7th meeting where she would present the initial forecast. But again, I think it'd be valuable if you all were having those conversations too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mariah, my sound was cutting out at some point. I think when you were presenting the memo from Administrator Kleckner, but did we make the point that this revenue is that we'll receive if voted will become part of our bottom line?
No, we didn't talk about it
years?
as being recurring, but yes, right. The idea is hopefully that that we would expect that future years, barring any sort of new revenues disaster, that would be a stable source of recurring funds. Helen, I see your hand is up, and then I'm hoping we can end a couple minutes early. Go ahead.
I just wanted to go back to that list where you talked about in the budget. You just had it up before.
The
and-
guidelines document?
Yeah, the guidelines.
Yeah.
And
Do you want me to pull it back up?
if you don't mind,
Yep.
because it'll help me to just focus. It has to do with the one where we talk about the expenses related to selection and implementation of a dyslexia screener. It would seem to me we need, I mean, we're not just looking to screen, but we're looking to then provide services. And I would hope that we would get to a screener sometime in this spring, do that screening, and then provide services. So we would need monies, I would think, budgetary monies to provide those services once we identify the students. I don't know what Linus and Sam think.
No, you make a good point there, Helen. I think and what we'll do is I'll talk back to Casey and Leslie because I think, so I want to make sure that I understand fully what our system is presently, where we're presently deficient.
Mhm.
And if it's the identification part, that's one thing, but then what might be the additional impact on the system, depending on how many students are actually identified. So
I mean,
that's a
it would
good
be really
point.
hard, I think, as a parent to know your kid's identified and then know there's not services because there's nothing in the budget till the following year.
Right.
Well, there has to
Okay.
be services if your kid gets identified.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're right. We should forecast that and plan for it as opposed to
Thank you.
get caught on. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Any other comments? Susan, David, any more comments on the guidelines that we want to share back with Linus and Sam before next week's meeting? We're gonna, I think the goal would be, if people are comfortable with this, that next week we could at least devote the calendar as a committee with those 4 dates called out. And then depending on how the conversation goes, we could see about the priorities. But Susan, go ahead. No? Okay. David, any more comments on the priorities for now?
No, I think this is good.
Okay. Great. We got new business on the agenda. Anything else we need to talk about?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Thank you, Linus. Thank you, Donna.
Well, thank you too, Mariah, for shepherding.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good night.
Good
Bye,
night.
everyone.
Good night.